to Classic ASMR 01. I think that's what we are anyway. And I mentioned the last couple of videos, we're actually trying to raise money for a theatre company. We're trying to get, I think it's 1,000 followers you need before you can make any money. I don't wish to be commercial at this time of year. Ooh, ooh, ooh. But it's pretty tough out there, so I'm very pleased to report we are now at 39 subscribers. So thank you very much indeed if you subscribed. And if there's any way you can spread the word if you quite like this, then that would be great too. We've been looking at this book. I went into London, down Charing Cross Road, and I actually was looking for another book. I popped in and this was there. Well, I introduced you to it a couple of videos ago, and we're halfway through our first story, our first Christmas story by Charles Dickens. So I think it's time we should carry on. Again, apologies for our very crude equipment. I'm doing this on a desk with a, oops, where are we? With a phone camera, which occasionally moves. I hope these people don't mind that I'm using their bookmark. It's a lovely place in Wales. And they've got a craft shop there. I don't think I should say who it is because I'm not quite sure if there are rules about that. I'm a bit new here. But you can see this lovely little painting, Harbour Master Hotel, Aberystwyth. The place is called Aberystwyth. It's on the Dylan Thomas trail as well. Dylan Thomas, the Welsh poet. But I've got some stuff of his I'd like to share with you at some point if you would like to. But for now, hopefully we'll stick with Charles Dickens. Hopefully this will relax you. Excuse my cold. So this is called The Seven Poor Travellers. And we got as far as here, that our main character, faint and unworthy minister, for once of Master Richard Watts, whose this place is, should preside as the Christmas supper host of the 6 poor travellers. It kind of makes more sense if you see the previous video, but I hope you'll find this fairly relaxing. I went back to my inn to give the necessary directions for the turkey and roast beef, and during the remainder of the day could settle to nothing for thinking of the poor travellers. When the wind blew hard against the windows, it was a cold day, with dark gusts of sleet alternating with periods of wild brightness, as if the air were dying fitfully. I pictured them advancing towards their resting place along various cold roads, and felt delighted to think how little they foresaw the supper that awaited them. I painted their portraits in my mind and indulged in little heightening touches. I made them footsore. I made them weary. I made them carry packs and bundles. I made them stop by finger posts and milestones, leaning on their bent sticks and looking wistfully at what was written there. I made them lose their way and filled their 5 wits with apprehensions of lying out all night and being frozen to death. I took up my hat and went out, climbed to the top of the old castle, and looked over the windy hills that sloped down to the Medway, River Medway that would be in Kent, almost believing that I could descry some of my travellers in the distance. After it fell dark, and the cathedral bell was heard in the invisible steeple, quite a bower of frosty rime when I had last seen it, striking 5, 6, 7, I became so full of my travellers that I could eat no dinner, and felt constrained to watch them still in the red coals of my fire. They were all arrived by this time, I thought, had got their tickets and were gone in. There, my pleasure was dashed by the reflection, and probably some travellers had come too late and were shut out. After the cathedral bell had struck 8, I could smell a delicious savour of turkey and roast beef rising to the window of my adjoining bedroom, which looked down into the inn yard, just where the lights of the kitchen reddened a massive fragment of the castle wall. It was high time to make the wassail now. Therefore, I had up the materials, which, together with their proportions and combinations, I must decline to impart as the only secret of my own I was ever known to keep, and I made a glorious jorum. Not in a bowl, for a bowl anywhere but on a shelf is a low superstition, fraught with cooling and slopping, but in a brown earthenware pitcher, tenderly suffocated when full with a coarse cloth. It being now upon the stroke of 9, I set out for Watts' charity, carrying my brown beauty in my arms. I would trust Ben, the waiter, with untold gold, but there are strings in the human heart which must never be sounded by another, and drinks that I make myself are those strings in mine. The travellers were all assembled. The cloth was laid, and Ben had bought a great billet of wood and had laid it artfully on the top of the fire, so that a touch or two of the poker after supper should make a roaring blaze. Having deposited my brown beauty in a red nook of the hearth, inside the fender, where she soon began to sing like an ethereal cricket, diffusing at the same time odours as of ripe vineyards, spice forests, and orange groves. I say, having stationed my beauty in a place of security and improvement, I introduced myself to my guests by shaking hands all round and giving them a hearty welcome. I found the party to be thus composed. Firstly, myself. Secondly, a very decent man indeed, with his right arm in a sling, who had a certain clean, agreeable smell of wood about him, from which I judged him to have something to do with shipbuilding. Thirdly, a little sailor boy, a mere child, with a profusion of rich dark brown hair and deep womanly-looking eyes. Fourthly, a shabby, genteel personage in a threadbare black suit and apparently in very bad circumstances, with a dry, suspicious look. The absent buttons on his waistcoat eked out with red tape, and a bundle of extraordinarily tattered papers sticking out of an inner breast pocket. Fifthly, a foreigner by birth, but an Englishman in speech, who carried his pipe in the band of his hat, and lost no time in telling me in an easy, simple, engaging way that he was a watchmaker from Geneva, and travelled all about the continent, mostly on foot, working as a journeyman, and seeing new countries. Possibly, I thought, also smuggling a watch or so, now and then. Sixthly, a little widow, who had been very pretty and was still very young, but whose beauty had been wrecked in some great misfortune, and whose manner was remarkably timid, scared, and solitary. Seventhly and lastly, a traveller of a kind familiar to my boyhood, but now almost obsolete. A book peddler who had a quantity of pamphlets and numbers with him, and who presently boasted that he could repeat more verses in an evening than he could sell in a 12-month. All these I have mentioned in the order in which they sat at table. I presided, and the matronly presence faced me. We were not long in taking our places, for the supper had arrived with me in the following procession. Myself with the pitcher, Ben with beer. Inattentive boy with hot plates. Inattentive boy with hot plates. The turkey. Female carrying sauces to be heated on the spot. The beef. Man with tray on his head containing vegetables and sundries. Volunteer hostler from hotel, grinning and rendering no assistance. The hostler. As we passed along the high street, comet-like, we left a long trail of fragrance behind us, which caused the public to stop, sniffing in wonder. We had previously left at the corner of the inn yard. A wall-eyed young man, connected with the fly department and well accustomed to the sound of a railway whistle which Ben always carries in his pocket, whose instructions were, so soon as he should hear the whistle blown, to dash into the kitchen, seize the hot plum pudding and mince pies, and speed with them to Watt's Charity, where they would be received, he was further instructed, by the sauce female, who would be provided with brandy in a blue state of combustion. All these arrangements were executed in the most exact and punctual manner. I never saw a finer turkey, finer beef, or greater prodigality of sauce and gravy, and my travellers did wonderful justice to everything set before them. It made my heart rejoice to observe how their wind and frost-hardened faces softened in the clatter of plates and knives and forks, and mellowed in the fire and supper heat, while their hats and caps and wrappers hanging up, a few small bundles on the ground in a corner, and in another corner 3 or 4 old walking sticks, worn down at the end to mere fringe, linked this snug interior with the bleak outside in a golden chain. When supper was done and my brown beauty had been elevated on the table, there was a general requisition to me to take the corner, which suggested to me comfortably enough how much my friends here made of a fire. For when had I ever thought so highly of the corner, since the days when I connected it with Jack Horner. However, as I declined, Ben, whose touch on all convivial instruments is perfect, drew the table apart, and instructing my travellers to open right and left on either side of me and form around the fire, closed at the centre with myself and my chair, and preserved the order we had kept at table. He had already, in a tranquil manner, boxed the ears of the inattentive boys, until they had been, by an imperceptible degree, boxed out of the room, and he now rapidly skirmished the sauce female into the high street, disappeared, and softly closed the door. This was the time for bringing the poker to bear upon the billet of wood. I tapped it 3 times like an enchanted talisman, and a brilliant host of merrymakers burst out of it and sported off by the chimney, rushing up the middle in a fiery country dance and never coming down again. Meanwhile, by the sparkling light which threw our lamp into the shade, I filled the glasses and gave my travellers Christmas, Christmas Eve, my friends. And when the shepherds, who were poor travellers too, in their way, heard the angels sing, on earth peace, goodwill towards men. I don't know who was the first amongst us to think that we ought to take hands as we sat, in deference to the toast, or whether any one of us anticipated the others. But at any rate, we all did it, and we then drank to the memory of the good Master Richard Watts, and I wish his ghost may never have been worse usage under that roof than it had from us. It was the witching time for storytelling. "A whole life, travellers," said I, "is a story more or less intelligible, generally less, but we shall read it by a clearer light when it is ended. I, for one, am so divided this night between fact and fiction that I scarce know which is which. Shall I beguile the time by telling you a story as we sit here?" They all answered yes. I had little to tell them, but I was bound by my own proposal. Therefore, after looking for a while at the spinal column of smoke wreathing up from my brown beauty, through which I could have almost sworn that I saw the effigy of Master Richard Watts, less startled than usual, I fired away. And at that point, I think we'll take a break again. I'm not sure how long these should be. Oops. But he's quite clever, isn't he, old Charles Dickens? It's set on a Christmas Eve. And this is my rather expensive 1870 copy of his Christmas short stories. So I hope you've got some relaxation out of that. As I say, I'm sorry about the pretty basic equipment and wires that I can't get out of the way. This is on my writing desk in London. And if you do like it, then please, as I say, we're trying to get to 1,000 followers. Whether that's going to happen or not, I have no idea. I'm not even sure how we promote this. And we haven't got any money to spend on ads. So if you could spread the word, that would be fantastic. I don't know what we'll do if we get to 1,000. Anyway, that's for later, as they say. But I hope you've enjoyed this little session that we've had together. I hope you can find it relaxing. I know I use ASMR an awful lot to drift off in the evenings. And I quite often like it when I don't have to watch. I can just listen. And hopefully you can do the same here. So thank you again for your time. Press the buttons that you know better than I do. I think they would the subscribe and like or gosh, listen to me. But if you could do any of that, we'd be very, very grateful. And of course, I don't know when you're listening to this, it's probably not at Christmas, but if you are listening to it fairly soon, then happy holidays, as they say in America, in the USA. Happy Christmas, as we say here, and Happy New Year, as we say all over the world. To quote a certain Charles Dickens, bless us all, everyone.